Good day, students. Welcome to mathgotserved.com. In this clip, we're going to be looking at section 2.4a of our virtual Algebra 1 text. We're going to be focusing on how to solve absolute value equations. Alright, before we get started with some examples, let's take a look at the meaning of an absolute value equation, okay? We'll take a look at that real quick and then do some examples. So, let's write down the following. Absolute value equations. Now, if you have the absolute value equation, the absolute value of x is equal to some number, let's say the number is a, what does this equation mean? This equation means that x is a units to the left or right of 0 on the number line. Okay? Another way you can think of this is the distance. Okay? The distance from 0 to x, either to the left or to the right, is a units. Okay? So a units represents the distance from 0 to x, either to the left or to the right on the number line. Okay, to help illustrate, let's take a look at the following graphical representation of what we're talking about. So let's say we have 0 on the number line, okay? And then you go a units to the left. So let's say this is a units to the left, negative a. 1, 2, 3. And then to the right you have a units. So if you go a units to the left and to the right, so this represents a units to the left, negative a to the left. And then this right here represents positive a, which is a units to the right. Now the numbers that you hit are basically what x are. Okay, so x is negative a and x is a. That is what this equation is telling us. Okay, so the distance from x to 0 on the number line is a. So we have two solutions that satisfy this absolute value equation, absolute value of x equals a. Alright, so that's basically what absolute value means. Now there's another point that you want to keep in mind, very important. So one thing to note is that the absolute value of x is always positive. Okay? It's always positive. Why is that? Well, it is because this notation right here represents a distance, and distance is always positive. Okay, so distance is always positive. Think about your weight, for example, or your age or your height. Okay, those are always positive. There's no such thing as a negative weight or negative height. Okay, so the absolute value quantity is always positive. So what does that mean? This implies that if you have the absolute value equal to a negative number, there's going to be no number that satisfies this equation. So this will basically imply that there are no solutions. So there are no solutions to that. Okay? For example, if you're asked to solve the absolute value of x equals negative 5. If you look at this, it's telling you that the distance from x to 0 on the number line, either to the left or to the right, is negative 5. Does that make any sense? The answer is no, because the distance can never be negative. So if you have a scenario like this, your answer is simply going to be no solution. Alright, so watch out for this and the examples that we're going to be working on. Alright, so the instructions are for us to solve the given absolute value equations. So for number one, we have the absolute value of x equals 4. Alright, so first things first, we need to get rid of this absolute value bracket. Okay, so to get rid of this absolute value bracket, we're going to replace it by its equivalent. So let's write down the solution. We have absolute value of x minus 9 equals 4. So the equivalent is plus or minus the quantity x minus 9 equals 4. Remember, for absolute value, you're going to the left and to the right. So in this case, we're going 4 units to the left and right when x is shifted 9 units to the right. Okay? So you replace the absolute value with parentheses and plus or minus, indicating the left and right direction. Now we need this plus or minus on the right side. Okay? So to accomplish that, we'll simply divide or multiply both sides by plus or minus 1. When we carry out that step, we're going to end up with x minus 9 equals 4 divided by plus or minus is plus or minus 4. And then the quantity x minus 9, plus or minus x minus 9 divided by plus or minus 1, the x minus 9s basically cancel each other out. And then we just have x minus 9. Alright, so here is where the split happens. Okay, this one equation is now going to become 2. It's going to be the negative part and the positive part. Okay, so we're going to put the negative part to the left and the positive part to the right. Let's start with the negative part. So with the negative part, we're going to have x minus 9 equals negative 4. And then for the positive part, we have x minus 9 equals positive 4. Okay, now to solve this first equation, we're simply going to do what? Well, we want to get x by itself. So we need to get rid of negative 9. So we're going to use the inverse operation of subtracting 9. The inverse of subtracting 9 is to add 9. So we'll apply the inverse operation plus 9 to both sides of the equation. Okay, so what happens? That will give us, that'll give us x equals, this minus 9 and plus 9 cancel out, so we have x equals negative 4 plus 9 is positive 5. Remember, the signs are different, so you subtract and keep the sign of the bigger, which is positive 9. Alright, so that's one answer. Now let's take a look at the positive side. Here we're going to get rid of positive 9 here, so we use the inverse operation. We add 9 to both sides of the equation. When we add 9 to both sides of the equation, we end up with x equals, so minus 9 plus 9 does cancel out. 4 plus 9 is 13. Alright, so your solutions are the set containing elements 5 and 13. Answers to question number 1. Alright, let's take a look at another example similar to this. Problem number 2. Let's say we have the equation, the absolute value of 10x minus 5 equals 25. Alright, let's go ahead and solve this. Now, if you look at this, on the left side of the equation, we have the absolute value bracket that equals to 25. Alright, so we want to replace this absolute value bracket with its equivalent using parentheses. So to accomplish that, we'll simply replace it with plus or minus quantity, or parentheses, 10x minus 5 is equal to 25. That's exactly what we did here in the first step. Now you see what we're going to do next? We're going to get rid of this plus or minus. We'll divide both sides by plus or minus 1. The plus or minuses on the left side cancel out. 10x minus 5 divided by 1 is simply 10x minus 5. And then 25 divided by plus or minus 1 is plus or minus 25. Now this is where we're going to do the split. Okay, we're going to split it into the negative part and the positive part. Okay? Alright, let's start with the negative part. So with the negative part, what do we have? Well, in the negative part, we have 10x minus 5 equals negative 25. So you just take the negative part of this answer here. And then for the positive part, we have 10x minus 5 equals positive 25. So we have to solve these two equations. Now, how do we solve these equations? For the first one on the left, it's a two-step equation. We're going to add 5 to both sides and then divide by 10. That will get x by itself. Okay? Add 5 divided by 10. Let's do it. So we add 5 to both sides because that undoes minus 5. And then that's going to give us, what's that going to give us? That's going to give us on the left side, these two add up to 0. So we have 10x is equal to negative 25 plus 5. The signs are different, so you subtract and keep the sign of the bigger. And then the last step, we just simply divide both sides by 10 because the relationship between 10 and x is multiplicative, right? So to undo multiplication, you divide. All right? On the left side, the 10s divide out to 1. Okay, so we're left with x equals, on the right side, negative 20 divided by 2. Sorry, negative 20 divided by 10 is negative 2. Same procedure will apply to the left, to the second equation. Okay, to get x by itself, we're going to add 5 to both sides and then divide by 10. Alright, let's do it. So first add 5 to both sides to get rid of this negative 5 on the left side of the equation. Alright, and then we're going to have these two, minus 5 plus 5, add up to 0. And then we're left with 10x equals 25 plus 5 is 30. Now to finish this up, we want to undo this 10 times x. So we use the inverse of multiplication, which is division. So we divide both sides by 10, and that yields x equals, this 10s, they divide out, 10 goes here 1, 10 goes here 1, 1s. 30 divided by 10, you can just cancel all the zeros, you get 3. Okay, so your solution for question number 2 are the numbers negative 2 and 3. Okay, so that's that. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look at question number 3. So question 3, what if you were to solve the equation the absolute value of m plus 4 minus 6 equals negative 11? Alright, let's go ahead and do this. We're adding more steps now. So when you have an absolute value quantity with a number added or subtracted to it, the goal or your first step will be to isolate the absolute value quantity. So we want to get this quantity isolated so we can break it down. Okay, to accomplish that, we have to get rid of minus 6. So we're going to use the inverse operation of minus 6, which is to add 6. So we're going to add 6 to both sides of the equation. When you add 6 to both sides of the equation, we're going to achieve our desired goal, which is to have the absolute value, quantity by itself, absolute value of m plus 4, equals 11, negative 11 plus 6, negative 5. Okay? Now, before we proceed with breaking this equation down, let's take a look at what we have. We have an absolute value quantity equal to a negative number. So we're saying that this distance is equal to negative 5. Is that possible? The answer is no. Remember we talked about this earlier, that the absolute value of a variable is always going to equal a positive number because it represents distance. Okay, so let's write down a note here in our solution. Absolute value is never negative. So what does that mean? Since absolute value is never negative because it's a distance, we have no solution to this particular equation. Okay? So what do we learn from this example? When you get the absolute value quantity isolated, examine the number to your right and ask yourself the question: is the number to the right of the isolated absolute value quantity positive or negative? If it is negative, you have to stop right there. There are going to be no solutions. If it's positive, then you can proceed with the problem solving process. Okay? Alright, now let's take a look at the last example for this presentation. What if we were to solve the equation negative 5 plus 7 times the absolute value of negative v plus 8 equals 86? Alright, let's go ahead and solve this. Now, let's rewrite the problem. Negative 5 plus 7 times the absolute value of negative v plus 8 equals 86. Now, our first goal will be to isolate the absolute value quantity. Okay? So to do that, we need this one gone first and then this one gone next, in that order. Alright, so let's go ahead and get rid of negative 5 because it's further out. 7 is much more closer to the absolute value. So you do the closer one last. Alright? So to get rid of negative 5, we're going to use the inverse operation, which is to add 5. We're going to add 5 to both sides of the equation. Okay? So we add 5 to both sides of the equation. On the left side, the minus 5 and plus 5 add up to 0. So those ones add up to 0. And we are left with 7 times the absolute value of negative v plus 8 is equal to 86 plus 5 is 91. Alright, so 7 is being multiplied by this absolute value quantity. So to undo that multiplication, we're going to use the inverse, which is division. So we're going to divide both sides by 7. Okay. And then we're going to have the absolute value quantity isolated because these two divide each other out by 1. So you have the absolute value of negative v plus 8 equals 7 goes into 9 once, remainder 2. 7 goes into 21 3 times, positive 13. Or you can use long division to divide that out. Okay? Alright, now let's look at this. We have absolute value equals a positive number. That's good. We're now going to replace it with its parenthesis equivalent, which is plus or minus parenthesis negative v plus 8. That's equal to 13. Now we're going to proceed to move that plus or minus over to the right side of the equation so we can split it. To accomplish that, we're going to divide both sides of the equation by plus or minus 1. Okay, so that gives us negative v plus 8 equals 13 over plus or minus 1 is going to be plus or minus 13. Now this is where we're going to split the equation. into 2. Okay, we're going to put the negative 1 on the left and a positive 1 on the right. Alright, so let's go ahead and do that. We're going to have, for the negative 1, negative v plus 8 equals negative 13. And then for the positive 1, negative v plus 8 equals positive 13. Alright, to get v by itself here is a two-step process. We're going to get rid of the positive 8 and then the negative v. I'm sorry, and then the negative. Okay? Alright, so let's get rid of the positive 8. To do that, you subtract 8 from both sides of the equation. We're subtracting because that's the inverse of addition. Okay? Inverse of addition is subtraction. Alright, so that will give us a solution, negative v, because these two add up to 0, they're gone, equals negative 13 minus 8. The signs are the same, so you add the numbers and keep the sign. Now, negative v, we have an invisible number here, namely 1. It's negative 1. So to get rid of this negativity, this negative 1, since it's been multiplied, we are going to use the inverse of multiplication, which is division. So divide both sides by negative 1. And then you will have your final answer. These minus 1's divide out. You will have v equals negative 21 over negative 1 is 21. Alright, on the right side, we're going to go ahead and get v isolated. To do that, we'll subtract 8 from both sides of the equation first, like we did the first equation. That will enable us to isolate negative v. We chose to subtract because the relationship between negative v and 8 is positive, so we're using the inverse. Okay, so that adds up to 0, so we have negative v equals 13 minus 8. Subtract the numbers, 5, keep the sign of the bigger positive. To get v isolated, we need to get rid of this negative. There's an invisible 1 right here that's being multiplied by the v. So to get rid of that, we're going to undo it by dividing by negative 1. You can also multiply by negative 1. You will accomplish the same goal. Okay? So you're going to have minus and minus divide out, and then you have v equals 5 divided by negative 1. The signs are different, so it's going to be negative 5. That's your final answer. Alright? So our solutions to question number 4 are negative 5 and 21. Now, how well did you understand the contents of this presentation? To demonstrate mastery, we would like you to try out the following problems. Try these. What you're going to do is you copy the problems down, pause the video, and then you work on them. And then click on the playback button, and you'll see what the answers are. Okay? So the goal is to solve each absolute value equation. Number 1, let's say we have the absolute value of 10x equals 80. So value of 10x equals 80. Number 2, the absolute value of x plus 5 minus 9 equals negative 1. Number 3, negative 6 plus the absolute value of 9 plus 2n equals negative 11. Number 4, the absolute value of m plus 4 plus 9 equals 21. Number 5, the absolute value of negative 8n minus 3 plus 2 equals negative 97. And then number 6, 3 plus 7 times the absolute value of 1 plus 4x equals 108. Alright, so go ahead and click on the pause button on the video, try out these problems, and then when you're done, click on the playback button to see what the answers are. Alright, so hopefully you've had the chance to work on these problems. Let's go ahead and take a look at what the answers are. For question 1, your solutions are 8 and negative 8. For question 2, your solutions are 3 and negative 13. For number 3, you have no solutions because when you isolate the absolute value quantity, you end up with a negative number. For number 4, your solutions are 8 and negative 16. For number 5, you have no solutions again. And then for number 6, you have 7 and 2. So if you have issues with any of these problems, just post a comment in the comment section below and we'll be glad to assist you with your question. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this presentation. Really appreciate it. If you found the contents of this tutorial helpful in your studies of absolute value equations, do give us a thumbs up. Your positive feedback is very valuable to us. As indicated earlier, if you have any questions or comments, just post it in the comment section below and we'll be more than glad to respond. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for updates to other tutorials such as this. More videos, worksheets, games, and tools can be found at mathgotserved.com. Do check it out. Thanks again for watching and have a wonderful day. Goodbye.